Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of His Dark Materials. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this is being an episode where a lot of stuff converges and a lot of stuff connects in certain regards. There's just so many moving threads at once. Obviously, you have Lee and John running from the Magisterium people. Then you have everything with... Well, let's focus on Lee and John first and foremost. That situation, obviously, they're racing to get to... They only think they're getting to the knife bearer. And so, obviously, the Magisterium is catching up. So, Lee stands behind. And it's just kind of this situation where you're like, all right, somebody's got to come through to save him at the last minute, right? And I'm like... Come on. And then it just got more dire because obviously he's a little wounded, but he's like, I'm a good shot. You go on, Will. Like you go on, John, because you need to find the knife bearer. Because if you stay here and die to try and let me go, then the fact of the matter is, this is all going to be all for naught. But it's like, for him, it's like he's willing to lay his life on the line because, he's like, just make sure that knife bearer looks after Lyra because she's like a daughter to me. And obviously, he realizes how special she is. So he, and even by the look on John's face made me think like John kind of knew he himself was going to die. I didn't, because I thought it was going to be like, oh, he knew he was going to die, not necessarily that Lee would. But Lee takes his final stand. It's like, only got a couple bullets, but I'm going to make every shot count. And he does. Bam, bam. Then he takes one that like grazes his head, and Esther's like, no, you got it, and he keeps going, and it's just, it's like focus on something else. I don't know, focus on bacon. It's like he's like, I don't like to kill, and she's like, it's either them or you, and he's like, no, it's Lyra or them. So, but catching more and more bullets, and he calls for Serafina, and I was like, please let her get there in time. And then that heartbreaking moment of him being like, because obviously like where he gets shot at first, because it's like he can't move his arm. And so he can't shoot anymore. We don't even know if he had any bullets left anyway. But him, like Hester coming up to him and him like, don't you dare go before me. And it's just like, she's like, no, I'm still here with you. But she's still, it's like, that broke my heart because I was like, I didn't expect that. Lee's one of those characters. I was like, I figured like, it's one of those things where you're like, I kind of figured he had plot armor. But this show isn't afraid of being like, let's kill this character I mean, that's any story, the tug on your heartstrings, but it's just like, I didn't expect Lee to die. What makes it even more sad is he has not laid eyes on Lyra since she fell out, his balloon last season. And that wasn't even at the end of the season. That was like, episode 6 or 7 was the last time he saw her, and he hasn't seen her. He didn't even get to lay eyes on her this season. That's crazy to think about. Lee and Lyra didn't have a scene together. It's like he's so close, and that sucks. I was like, that's shitty, and that sucks. But also just like the thing between him and Hester. I think it's also because we got to learn a little bit more about Lee this season too. Like that conversation between him and Coulter. We learned about his abusive dad and everything. But it's never the easiest. Like, because Hester's a little bit different. Like, you've seen Debs, but it's also like, it's because Hester's someone that we spent time with and got to know, and just because obviously they're demons that we spend enough time with to kind of see how human they are. I mean, to be fair, they're just as much a human as their human counterpart is. So it's just like for her, it sucks. I was like, what? I was like, please tell me, like, Serafina's going to be able to bring her back or something. It's like, nope. I was like, Jesus. I was like, that's depressing as hell. I was like, why'd you do that? At the same time, there's a situation with Coulter, which I'm trying to, I'm still curious of why she treats her demon like crap. It's like, well, at first she's going after that witch, because that lady came there to warn her because she's like, oh, there's a human there with a demon. That must mean it's someone from our world. We got to warn them about those creatures, obviously not knowing that Coulter has all of them under her control. But when it's all said and done, she's like, tell me where Lyra is. But it's like, well, I don't know anything about a boy with a knife. And it's like, well, I'm so disappointed. And her demon ends up attacking the witch's demon and holding it for the Spectre to get. And it's like, why won't you tell me about Lyra? And she drops the bomb, like, her Eve, that's who she is. So, and those were questions I was bringing up last episode, because I didn't know whether they were suggesting, like, there was, like, that there was someone before Lyra and that she was Eve, or whether there was an Eve before her. And that's why I was wondering, like, is she Lilith or something? Like, I didn't know whether, but it's like, but now the way Coulter talks about, she's like, she's Eve. I can't let her fall again. So I'm like, I'm assuming that's supposed to represent, she's basically the second coming of Eve. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. So I guess there was an Eve before now that fell, or maybe she's just talking about the metaphorical Eve, not necessarily like in the sense that the previous person's name wasn't Eve, but she was in the same boat. But the way it's sounding, it sounds like basically the first person to do this was Eve, and that basically Lyra is the second Eve. So, but for Coulter, she's willing to, it's like, I'm going to, I've got to protect Lyra. I won't let her fall again. But then you have that situation where it's like her demon was whimpering, and she was just like, stop whimpering. And I'm like, why do you treat your demon like that? Like, I mean, once again, we still don't know what your whole deal is. Like, before it seemed you were kind of a witch, but at the same time, it's like your deal is something else, and we don't know fully what it is. But the fact is, you have control over, she has control over the specters, and they were kind of inching toward. I'm like, you're just gonna let them? But part of me, and the last episode kind of like makes me think that what she said, how she controls the specters, is by suppressing like basically what makes her human, what they're interested in you about. So part of me is wondering, like, is that, I mean, once again, demons are kind of an extension of you. They're another side of you. They're a literal manifestation of kind of like part of your soul and everything. So it makes me wonder, like, is that what her demon is? Like, for her, it's like, you're kind of my weakness. You're that, like, her treating him like crap is her, like, getting mad at her own weakness. It's like why she can be so cold and stern at times is because all her human, like anything that makes her human, probably your typical emotions, she keeps them buried in her demon. Like, that's what he represents. He's a manifestation, just all the stuff that she feels is unnecessary. And so maybe that's why she's able to do what she does and just be separated from her demon with no issues, like a witch. I don't know. Like I said, they brought it up earlier in the season, that basically there's a thing that witches have to go through that gives them the ability to be separated from their demons and basically helps them become witches. So that was like, did Coulter go through that and maybe not go through the full process of becoming a witch, but maybe she went through that or something. We don't know, but it's like, and then later on, she was even telling her demon, like, you're either with me or against me. And being against me is being against Lyra, and even kicks him. Because that's why I'm like I said, I think maybe it's just a reminder of her own weakness in some shape or form. But it's just kind of a thing of like, we have to save Lyra, and just then she's kind of petting him after her demon. It's like, it's such an abusive, complicated thing. And I'm like, what is the deal with that? So there's that side of things. And then there's also, we have Mary, who dropped off the kids, with the adults who had left the city and everything. Granted, not all of them, just those two. So I'm wondering what that said about the other kids. But it's just like, Mary's like, oh, I'm here for something important. Like, we only get a little bit with Mary this episode. It's kind of a shame that she didn't even get to meet up with Lyra and them. But it's like, she's got her own role to play in everything that's coming, which I think speaks volumes that it was the angels that pointed her in this direction. We'll kind of have to see. Which now in retrospect, I'm wondering, is that what that's supposed to be? Lee couldn't be there for her, so maybe that's what Mary's supposed to represent. Mary's supposed to be kind of like filling that role of Lee, that older protector. Maybe, I don't know. Because obviously she has so many people that care about her, that are trying to help her. I mean, because obviously Mary's supposed to be there to protect both Lyra and Will. Which we got some interesting developments with their relationship this episode. Because I thought was pretty neat where, obviously, it's a situation where, Pan was saying like, Will, you had this nightmare. And, it's like, that he was kind of shocked that Will was scared, and because Will's like, do I like hide it or whatever? Because to tell him, like, from Pan's perspective, Lyra looks at you as the most bravest person she knows, which obviously Will's like, I'm not, and I get just afraid. He's like, she's way braver than I am. And it's like, you're her best friend. And he's like, she's my best friend. I mean, because of his life, he hasn't really had any friends. So that's why she's very important to him. And you see her actually being awake, hearing all of that. And she smiles because it's, because obviously the only real, like, true blue friend she had was Roger, and obviously, but that's also a thing later on too, because it's like, she's like, I heard what you and Pan were talking about. I heard what he said about me being super brave sometimes, but not other times. And I think the reason why Pan meant that was, like, the fact is because she lets fear kind of get the best of her, because that's why she stopped kind of listening to the alethiometer, because it was like, because of it didn't, Roger died, so she got scared, because that's the alethiometer for you. It will tell you the truth, the blunt, hard truth. It doesn't soften the blow for you. So you might not want to accept it, but it will always tell you the truth. And so I think that's kind of what Penn was kind of inferring. Like, Lyra is sometimes so afraid that sometimes that fear makes her stop from taking action, because in her mind, it's like she's afraid because she's like, every time I do something, I make a mistake and other people suffer, And I think that burden, thinking about what happened to Roger, any mistakes she's ever made in general, obviously Boreal stealing the alethiometer from, like, it's just, she blames herself, and I think that fear keeps her from taking action. Will is suggesting that they leave the witches as well as Seraphina, which obviously she counts as one of the witches, behind, because it's like they're better off without us. It's safer for us because obviously we won't have the specters around, but also they won't come after us. Granted, Will's at the age where they're almost coming after him anyway, but at least he has a knife to protect him. So, but it's like, but Lyra doesn't want to leave because it's like, well, Seraphina is, protecting him. And once again, it's that thing of, I don't want to make the wrong move, because she later on talks about, these are two people that, she doesn't want anything to happen to, And there's also this interesting conversation later on between Pan and Lyra too, about obviously things are changing. And like, obviously it's like, and obviously Pan constantly shifting has been a thing, because Lyra brought it up last season. She doesn't want Pan to pick a form. She likes the fact is that he's always changing into something else. But eventually it's going to come the time where both of them are going to have to solidify who they are. Obviously we know what Destiny wants, or who she's supposed to be, Eve and everything. But, and that's a big question. Like, when it's all said and done, what is Pan going to end up being? Part of me was like, I would assume a bear, kind of like a bit of a Yorick situation, but I don't think that's kind of always been my thought, but maybe not. But obviously, I like the parallels of that, like her, because obviously it's a reflection of how she's never sure who she really is, like she not being solidified in who she is, and obviously that time coming, obviously it gets reflected within Pan, him being able to shift into whatever he wants. I think it's kind of interesting. I was about to say ironic, but not necessarily ironic. It's interesting because Will kind of finds his destiny in this episode, and Lyra's still kind of unaware of hers, which is ironic too, considering her destiny is to destroy Destiny. But it's like Will kind of finds out who he is while Lyra's still a little bit in the dark about it. So you have the whole situation of, Seraphina, being told by Lyra to go check on Lee, and she'll stay there, especially because she's like, oh, Lee's here, so she's going to have to find out the hard way that Lee is dead, which I'm curious how that conversation is going to go later on. I'm skipping around, but because Coulter spent enough time with Lee and knows how much he cares about her, so I'm curious what that conversation is going to be like when she eventually finds out, when they both end up finding out about that. We'll ultimately have to wait and see on that front, but yeah. Will is driven by the dreams of his dad. Well, the shaman, but not knowing it's his dad, but then like the meeting face to face. And it's just like, he has all these questions. This is who being this knife bearer, you being the shaman and everything. And, it's like, you're my also dad, and you were gone, because obviously he wants to ask so many questions, but, both of them have so many questions because there's so much both of them have missed out on. So it's like, why'd you leave and never come back? And he was like, I tried to. I could never find it, because he was like, how'd you get here, through a window? How did that happen? It's like, no, there's no time for you asking me questions. I'm the one that's going to be asking questions. But for him, it's like, he could never find a way back. So he thought, well, maybe I could take some of the stuff I've learned and do some good with it. So it's like, so you put other people before your family. He's like, no. He's like, the entire time I've been thinking about you and your mom. Like, if I could help, by helping everyone, I could help you, because for him, it's like this great destiny against the authority, which we'll get into in a second. But for him, it's like, going against them means freeing the world, freeing every world to be able to make your own choices and to make a world like that for his son, to leave behind worlds for his son that are like that is kind of what he wanted, you know? So, but obviously telling, you know, Will his destiny, what it is, bearing the knife bearer, and obviously it being a destiny he didn't want. But it's kind of like you don't have much of a choice. It was given to you. You have to kind of see it through to the end. Even suggesting, like, later on saying that basically he has to take this to Azrael because it's the only weapon that can kill the authority. And you're like, okay. And especially because I'm like, whoa. Which is, I mean, to be fair, they made it clear that blade can cut through anything. And obviously the authority is literally God. So it's kind of like, holy crap, this thing's a God killer, which is interesting. I wouldn't have expected this to be the direction they were going to go with this. I find that fascinating. You know, it's actually kind of interesting because it got me thinking about, well, since the conversation of God, it got me thinking about the TV show Lucifer and Azrael's blade. It's kind of interesting. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure, because obviously this pulls from like biblical stuff and Bible stuff anyway. But it's just, I never thought about that till just now. Because that was a weapon they have in that show. I'm sure it's a thing, I think that's literally Azrael's blade. But it basically can kill Celestials in the TV show Lucifer, so it makes sense. And especially because the subtle knife is what Azrael needs. So it's interesting that it's not his blade to wield, but I guess Will is supposed to be his blade wielder. It's interesting. I just never thought about that till just now. But John ends up sacrificing himself to save his son, you know, and, you know, Will just got his dad back. And because the sad thing is, I guess, in his mind, it's like, because beforehand, John was saying, like, hey, like, we were brought here for this moment. I was, you know, especially when he was like, all right, when it's all said and done, we'll go back home, right? You can tell that look on John's face. That solidified it even more. He knew he wasn't coming through. It's like, whether he saw it or not, I guess he knew that he didn't know the circumstances around it, but he knew so I think that's why he was saying goodbye to Lee, because he knew Lee wasn't going to survive and he knew he wasn't going to survive. So in general, he's like, this was going to be the last time we see each other. So, but it's like, you just got your dad back and just to lose him like that, you know? Because obviously there's so much left unsaid, you know, so much left unresolved. It's kind of like he came here to drop this big bomb on you about what your deal is and everything, you know. So Will has to take up that mantle. At the same time, you have Coulter finding Lyra and taking her, because in her mind, it's like, I'm getting you away from all of this. It's like, because she might go about things the wrong way, but now in the grand scheme of things, because this is before she knew what Lyra's situation was. Like, I'm wondering, she has her reasons for doing what she's doing, but like, because didn't she try to justify her research as being something she was doing for Lyra's sake? Because I don't know. Or who knows fully what her... Because now it's all about protecting Lyra, because it's like, Lyra's special, she's my daughter, and I would do whatever. So for her, it's like, I'm going to take you somewhere safe and away from all of this. Because she knows kind of what's... Like, she doesn't know Lyra's full destiny, but hearing that she's Eve, and like, obviously knowing what Eve went through, because, you know, because obviously she went, you know, that situation, and she talked about it before with the whole Boreal thing about, like, who she could have been. Kind of, she was bound by so many people around her. She could never, you know, be, you know, rise to her full potential. But it's like, now I'll be a mother that can be there for Lyra to make sure that, you know, I'll take her somewhere safe that I think she could live out, you know, whether that's another world. Because, I mean, it's like, where else can you really go? I mean, also, because it seems like this isn't just a war in one world. It seems like a war amongst worlds, because Ruda had heard, like, I forgot what she had called them, but we haven't seen those things since last season, because it's interesting, because I brought it up earlier, the last time Lyra and Lee saw each other, they were attacked by those creatures, but the creatures are like, oh yeah, like, Azrael's basically waging war against the authority, and so it'll be a bigger battle than even the last one, but it's like, can Azrael win? He needs something to win, and obviously we now know it's the subtle blade that he needs, you know, so... Now is a situation where Ruda is like, I need to join sides. We as witches need to join forces with Azrael, because Azrael isn't just going against the Magisterium. He's going up against the authority itself, because this battle is just bigger than the Magisterium. It's like the authority has agents across all worlds. So basically the plan is to slice that large scale, basically across all dimensions, to cut, I guess, to basically bring free will. It's kind of similar a little bit. I'd compare it to Supernatural, because obviously, spoilers for the TV show Supernatural, they go up against Chuck, God. I think it's kind of a thing. Basically, it's a similar, things of a similar nature. But it's interesting in so many different regards, because I guess, because to me, it's interesting what their roles are. Because if you were to ask me like, oh, Azrael's a good guy, I'm like, what? No, he's the bad guy, especially killing Roger and everything. But it's the thing of like, for the greater good, I have to make sacrifices. So it's like, he seemed like he was the bad guy, but I guess because to me, I thought everything Azrael did was just because it's like, oh, like, I'm an explorer, I want to see the worlds, but it's like, maybe it started off that way, but then it became more than that, It became, saving the worlds, It's like, yeah, I have to do some evil and terrible stuff to get there and do it, but it's for the greater good. But it's like, how much are you willing to justify, all the terrible stuff you've done? Especially, are you going to justify that to your daughter? You killed one of her best friends to accomplish where you are, you threw the worlds into chaos doing what you're doing. But obviously it's like, well, he's trying to sow a little chaos because he's literally starting a war. It's just interesting because it's like, and her mom, who seems kind of evilish, is, obviously in her own right is trying to save her, but you can make the argument that technically she's even more evil because she's stopping Lyra from doing what she's doing, basically saving everyone. But it's like, it's that thing of like, are you putting someone else's, your selfish need of wanting to protect your child from the cruelty and just the twisted thing that is destiny? Which, once again, the irony being her being the one who's going to destroy destiny. So you're kind of being a little selfish by protecting her, but you're a mother and this is your daughter. You want to do right by her, but you're also stripping away what is necessary for this coming war. Because Serafina didn't go with Ruta. It's like, you want to go to Azrael, sure. You want to trust him, sure. But I'm going to put my trust in Lyra, in the destiny that she has, that she will bring about the end of destiny, And so at the end, you had Azrael making his plea as the angels are joining him. It's like, we will join you. Once again, like, I guess they're supposed to be fallen angels. I mean, because that's, because obviously it even made comparisons to the whole supernatural situation where like angels fell to earth in season 8. It was actually at the end of season 7, but at the beginning of season 8, if I remember correctly. You get what I'm trying to say. Because they said they wanted revenge. So I thought that was interesting. We never really got into that, but maybe it's because, well, angels are supposed to be, I would assume in this, what they're saying is like, angels, much like anyone, was kind of made by the authority. And so they were kind of bound as well by this authority figure to kind of probably serve their will or do a certain thing, much like everyone's kind of set across this path. No one has like true freedom. And maybe that's what the angels want. They're like, we want our freedom. Like, we were made in his image to be like controlled or be his tools. We want to be our own I don't know. Because once again, they haven't been seen in so long, but I guess the circumstances are now right. This is the opportunity to strike back. I'm wondering what the authority is going to look like, especially because you got the Magisterium like bolstering and willing to, obviously, they're going after Lyra in particular, so culture is not going to be safe in that regard. Laying low is not going to be the easiest thing, but obviously it's like that, and obviously this full-scale, literal War of the Worlds type of situation, which is going to be an interesting development. Like I said, at the same time, you have Will kind of accepting his destiny, putting on his dad's coat. So that's going to be interesting. Then we also had that little, I guess, credit sequence where it's like Roger's calling out the Lyra and she's like, where is this? And I'm like, is that supposed to be some like ethereal plane where souls meet? So like, then part of me was like, is there some way for her to meet up? If Roger's there, maybe Lee's there as well. Like maybe, she ends up going to a plane of existence. Maybe that has to deal with the authority and stuff like that in her destiny. But maybe she goes to a plane where Roger and Lee are. Maybe it's kind of what awaits you. Maybe because she's unconscious and like her destiny's drawing her into. I don't know. I'm kind of talking out of my ass here. So it's going to be interesting to, see where all this will take us. His Dark Materials has been renewed for a third and final season, which kind of comes as no surprise because the way I've never read the books, I think I've made that clear, but someone had explained it during season one that season one was basically one book, so I figured this would be the second book, so it makes sense for there to be a third and final season because I'm sure the third season this is the second book, and I'm sure the third and final season book would be the third book because if you're unaware, this is based on a trilogy of books. His Dark Materials being the name of the entire trilogy. Each of the three books has its own title. Like, I think the first one's The Golden Compass, hence where the movie got its name from. But regardless, I'm curious to see where they go, because obviously it's just... I also was surprised. I was like, oh, the way they set this up, I was like, I guess we'll just see Azrael in the next season. And while I'm literally after I've had that thought, he immediately pops up. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting to see him at all this season. So him kind of being like the stinger, somewhat the stinger at the end of the season was kind of interesting, but still that thing of like so many roads collided, but at the same time still so far apart because Serafina's rushing back, but obviously Lyra's already gone, so Will's got his own destiny. He's supposed to be joining up with Azrael, which obviously is going to be a complicated thing because you're supposed to be helping Azrael, but then also so is Lyra, but obviously Lyra's got her complications, which obviously Will can understand. Granted, his dad didn't do the same thing, but obviously he had complicated, feelings with his dad. So I'm sure that's going to play some role in the complicated feelings Lyra's going to have towards Adriel. I'm curious, is Coulter keeping the Spectres? Did they go with her, or are they just staying behind? I'm curious to kind of see how that all ends up playing out. I also like putting someone in a box. I came across something recently in a video game that was referencing that, but I feel like there was some TV show I remember that from too. Oh, well, I was thinking Blind Spot's kind of similar, but I feel like there was something else because it was specifically a box and not a bag. But maybe Blind Spot was what I was thinking. I don't know. It just hit me because I'm like, there's something specific that had someone in a box and I just can't remember what. I was about to say Prodigal Son might be it. Maybe because I did a video on it recently and that's what's on my mind. Regardless, I'm on this huge tangent, but I'm excited to see what season 3 has in store for us. How the final arc of this adventure plays out, where this story will take us towards the end. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.